In this lesson, we will learn about an introduction to explain phonetics, consonants, vowels, and how they are produced. Phonetics is the study of the articulatory and acoustic properties of the sounds of human language. Sounds are produced from the lungs and then go through the vocal tract. And finally, out of the mouth or the nose. If the air, once out of the glottis, is obstructed totally or partially, the sound is a consonant. For example, finger, dog, zing, leg. Yet, if the air is allowed to pass freely through the resonators, the sound is a vowel. For example, ant, arm, cat, sad, veil. In English, consonants are classified into stops. When producing a stop, the airflow is completely obstructed by the lips, teeth, and or tongue. For example, pa is produced by completely blocking the airflow at the level of the lips and by suddenly releasing the air with an explosion. Pa, pa. As to fricatives, they are produced with air escaping through a small passage. Thus producing friction or a hissing sound. For example, fa is made by pressing the lower lip lightly against the upper front teeth, a matter that obstructs the air partially, causing friction. Fa, fa. As to affricates, they are a combination of a stop and a fricative that make one new sound. For example, when pronouncing cha, the tongue begins with pronouncing ta, which is a stop, and ends with pronouncing sh, which is a fricative. Cha, cha. Some sounds are called nasals, and they are produced when the air is completely obstructed, as when pronouncing stops. But, unlike stops, the air coming from the lungs is forced into the nasal cavity. For example, sound is made by pressing the front of the tongue against the alveolar ridge. Yet, the air is released through the nose and not through the mouth. However, there is a sound called lateral oo, which is produced when the tongue tip makes contact with the alveolar ridge. The sides of the tongue are lowered, and the airflow is allowed to flow outward. O, o. Before learning about vowels, we have to learn about semivowels. And they are vowel-like sounds that come before and after vowel sounds. W, w. Now, we will learn about vowels. In the production of any English vowel sound, there is generally no obstruction of the outward flow of the breath stream. Vowels are divided into front vowels, which are produced when the body of the tongue is positioned forward of the resting position in the front of the mouth. For example, when pronouncing e, the tip and front of the tongue lie parallel to and slightly below the curve of the hard palate. That's to say, the high front position. E, e. As to central vowels, they are produced when the body of the tongue is positioned at resting position in the center of the mouth. For example, when pronouncing a, the body of the tongue is positioned in the center of the mouth. A. And finally, there are back vowels, which are produced when the body of the tongue is slightly positioned at the back of the mouth. For example, when pronouncing o, the body of the tongue is positioned at the back of the mouth. O, o. Now, let's learn about diphthongs, which have been described as sequences of two vowels pronounced together. So, diphthong simply means the combination of two vowel sounds, where the tongue begins with the position of a certain vowel sound and ends at another. For example, when pronouncing a, the tongue begins with the same position of e, and it ends at e. And finally, some sounds are called triphthongs. While diphthongs serve as a combination of two vowel sounds, triphthongs serve as a combination of three vowel sounds. When pronouncing a triphthong, the tongue begins with one vowel sound and it glides through a second to a third vowel sound. For example, when pronouncing aya, the tongue begins with pronouncing a, then it glides to pronounce e, and it ends with pronouncing a. You will learn about all these sounds in detail in the next lessons. Note that there is a flash for every sound to show you how to pronounce it.